In this video, I want to talk to you about emotional intelligence, the ability to understand how someone is feeling and predict how they will react in a given situation. In short, how to read someone. And when you think of the term reading someone, one of the areas where this is most critical is actually the game of poker. You may or may not know this, but aside from being a dating coach, I actually was a professional poker player as well. And what if I told you that the same way that you read a poker hand is the way you can read a person? Let's check it out. Now, the game of poker superficially is about taking the cards you have, matching them to what's on the table, and deciding how much your hand is worth. That's the basics. But most of what you're doing when you're actually playing poker is not that. Most of what you're doing when you're playing poker is paying attention, observing the other people at the table and figuring out their tendencies, figuring out how they play so that you know how to play against them. But how can you do this? How can you figure out something as complicated as a human being? How can you figure out what someone's going to do in situations you've never seen before? Well, the best you can do is you can have an approximate model that keeps improving as you get more and more and more information. Let me explain how that works. So let's say you sit down at the table, you have to kind of assume how people play. So the easiest way to do that is just, as a starter, assume everybody plays the way you play. Assume everybody does what you would do in a hand. Now, this isn't going to be correct, but it's a starting point. And once you have this starting point, your goal is every single time a hand is played, you want to guess before the cards are turned over what you expect the people to turn over. What do you think you're going to see? Now, every time the hand's turned over, you're either going to be surprised or not surprised. Every time you're surprised, that means that your model is a little bit wrong and you need to adjust your perceptions. So you have a baseline, a guess of who someone is, and then every bit of information improves that guess. Now let me explain to you how I would read people when I played poker. When you first meet someone, they're essentially a mystery to you. It's the equivalent to if you sit down at a poker table and you've never played a hand with someone before, you don't know how they play. But you have to start somewhere. You have to make a guess as to who they are. And there's two reasonable ways you could guess this in poker. You could guess that they play like the average of all the people you've ever met before, or you could assume they play very similar to you. Both kind of work. What you want to do is you establish a baseline. Similarly, when you meet a new person, right, you can either assume they're like everybody you've ever met on average, or you can actually just put yourself in their shoes and say, what would I do if I were them, right? Because you are a human being also, and you have the way you emotionally react, which is genetically pretty damn similar to who they are and how they will react. In any case, the important thing you need to do is you need to establish a baseline. You need to have a baseline guess of who you think this person will be. And the better your baseline guess is, it's helpful, but that's not the most important part. The most important part of reading someone is what you do from that baseline guess. And what you do is you pay attention. You pay attention to what they're doing, okay? So again, going back to poker, you sit down, you don't know this player at all. What you want to do is you want to watch each hand that is played, and every single time before someone turns over their cards, before someone shows what hand they have, you want to guess what hand they have. And sometimes you're going to be like, yeah, they have the hand I thought they had. In fact, if you're a good player, that's going to happen a lot. Other times they're going to turn over the cards like, wait, what? They played that way? And you're surprised. When you're surprised, that's good news, in a way. What that means is you just learned something. You just learned something new about this person, how they play, that then you can use in a future scenario. So again, going back to life. You assume the person is somewhat similar to you. You assume they're going to react the way you would react. And then they do something that shocks you. Well, now you just learned something about them. Now you just figured out, you just enriched your model of this person. You have a better understanding of them, a richer understanding of them than you did before. Now, here's the key part that a lot of people miss. When you see this unusual thing, you want to try and ask yourself why. You want to try and take this thing that surprised you and take your general understanding of the person and say, why did this person who I thought was this way act this way? And hopefully you have some kind of a theory or an idea as to what it was. Or hopefully you can ask yourself, what would make me do that in this situation? What would I have to be thinking to have done that thing? If you can figure that out, you not only learned how they played that hand or how they reacted in that situation, you actually are learning how they're likely to react in a lot of other situations. And that's the key. That's the key, because every poker hand is different. Every situation with a human being in life is different. So if you just know they did this and this and this and this, it's not useful. But if you say they did this and this and this, and I see a pattern. I see a pattern because each of these were timid actions, this is a timid person. Or each of these were very like aggressive, bombastic actions, this is an aggressive person. Or each of these were fearful actions, this is someone who's motivated by fear. You want to pay attention, know what surprises you, but very importantly, and this is the step most people miss, ask yourself why. Tell yourself a story. You want to have like a profile of who this person is, that with every bit of information, it feels like you know them better and deeper and more intimately. And sometimes you're going to still guess wrong, but over time, you're going to guess better and better and better. So let me give you an example from poker. Say someone is betting very, very aggressively. The natural assumption is they probably have a very good hand. And then they turn over nothing. They turn over a total bluff. You say, whoa, holy shit. I thought this guy was playing predictably. I thought this guy was playing his hand. Nope, this guy is capable of bluffing. So now in future hands, when you think of the possible hands he might have, you have to take into account he can have all the hands that are strong and make sense and that he's representing, or he can have a total bluff. That's now a possibility for him. Other people, you could play with them for hours and hours and hours, and every single time when they turn over their cards, they have what it looks like they have. With this person, you can basically assume this guy essentially never bluffs. He has it. When he starts betting strong, you can just fold. With the bluffer, you might have to actually call. You might have to show your hand and compete against his hands, even when your hand's only medium strong, because it's possible he just has nothing. So now let's take an example with women. Let's say there's a girl who's giving you a lot of shit verbally. She seems to always be trying to one-up you, trying to be clever, try and convince you that she doesn't like you. But at the same time, whenever there's an opportunity for her to leave, she doesn't. And whenever there's a silence in the conversation, she seems to want to stick around and fill that silence. Her words are saying one thing, but surprisingly, based on her words, her actions are saying something very different. Her words are saying, I don't care, I don't like you. Her actions are saying, I seem unwilling to leave. And if you think about it, even her words are saying, I'm willing to invest. Because giving you a hard time, trying to be a little bit difficult, actually does require mental effort. And so what is she actually doing? She's actually investing in the conversation. So superficially, it looks like she doesn't like you. But actually, all the important signs are saying she actually is invested. She actually does like this. She seems to keep sticking around. You should actually, a lot of times in this case, be encouraged. And a lot of guys give up. A lot of guys be like, oh no, she was giving me shit tests, or oh no, she didn't seem to like me. And right when they're on like the precipice of success, right when things are going very, very well, they just like throw in the towel, which is really sad because you miss so many opportunities that way. Now, these things seem counterintuitive at first, but as you're paying attention and seeing what actually plays out in the real world, it's very easy to see the patterns. This is an example of emotional intelligence. You put yourself into these social situations and you guess what's going to happen. The girl's giving me a hard time. I don't think things are going to go well. But wait, she sticks around and then it does go well. I'm surprised. Now that I'm surprised, I need to readjust my model, readjust my understanding of what's going on. This is all very detailed and it may actually sound sort of difficult, but in reality, it's actually much easier because over time, you're going to naturally develop an intuition. So I mentioned the scenario where in a poker game, you sit down and you don't know the player at all. But what's going to happen in reality is you're going to play similar poker games with similar people over and over again, and you're going to sort of get a feel for how people in this game play. And then even without knowing much about them, you'll be able to assume they're probably similar to others. Also, when you see this person did this thing, and I've also played with 10 other people who did that same thing, and they all played this way, now you can be like, the person that does this thing probably plays this way. And this happens with women as well. There are particular things I call blueprints of women, particular like general categories of women. When they act a certain way, they're very similar to other girls that have acted that way. And I've actually had it where, because I've dated a lot of girls in my life, I have a lot of experience with various women, sometimes a girl will do something and it reminds me so much of a girl I used to date. And I remember how I used to act with that girl I used to date. If I act that way with this new girl, very often she responds in almost exactly the same way. And why is it? It's because this behavior comes from the same place. So certain girls have a worldview about themselves and how they are, and that determines the words they use, the way they interact with you, the level of shit they give. It determines what their view of a relationship is. And when you notice that this girl is saying those exact same things the previous girl did, it's very often she has the same background and same socioeconomic status, and she came from maybe a similar country and has a similar friend group. The same types of things that were so effective with one girl are likely to be effective with this other girl as well. But how do you actually develop emotional intelligence on a practical level? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to get a ton of social experiences. You need to go out and talk to people. You need to go out and interact with people. Without getting a lot of data, you are not going to get good at this. And that's why guys who go out often and regularly, guys who go out multiple times a week and make it a habit in their life, those guys get good. However, that does take time, and that's not quite enough all by itself. It's a very, very good first step. In fact, it's a completely necessary step. You will not get good if you don't go out. But there's a second step, which a lot of guys miss, which is you also have to think. After you go out, you should spend, doesn't take a long time, maybe 15 minutes. Go through the events that transpired. Go through the things that stand out to you from the night. Remember, your reads in poker, your reads about people are the things that surprised you. What things stood out? What things didn't go the way you expected them to go? Every time that happens, you should be really happy because that's an opportunity to learn something socially. That's an opportunity to adjust your model and make it better. And so go over your night out or your day out and say, what were the standout experiences and why do I think they happened? What were my biggest challenges? Why do I think they happened? And then what can I take away from this? How can I make myself more effective the next time I deal with this type of girl? How can I make myself more effective the next time I'm in this unique situation? So A, you absolutely need the experience. There's no substitute for experience. You have to go out. But it also helps tremendously if you think. Instead of taking years and years of going out, you can take months of going out if you're able to analyze as you go out to get to the same place. There's one other huge benefit of noticing unusual phenomena, of noticing the things that surprise you, which goes even beyond reading other people. And it has to do with improving your own behavior. See, if every single time you go out, you're surprised, as in you see people acting a certain way and you're like, I can't believe they're doing this. This doesn't make sense. I would never do that. But those are the same people, or same guys especially, who seem to be popular or seem to be getting all the girls. Maybe you need to think there's something wrong with my model and maybe I should be copying them. Maybe I should, this thing that surprises me that I'm seeing out there, maybe that's something I could implement into my own behavior. I know this from when I was playing poker, right? I would see the winning players at the table making plays. I'm like, that's crazy. I would never do that. That's a bad play. But then these guys were going home with all the chips at the end of the poker game. And so I started to think to myself, maybe that's not a bad play. If I consistently see all the winning players doing this thing, maybe I need to think, maybe I need to copy them. And so another aspect of social intelligence is actually starting to copy the cool kids, starting to see what works from other people and being flexible enough in your own identity to adopt and adapt some of those behaviors to your own way of being and your own way of interacting socially. And this goes beyond reading people, but it is another element of social intelligence. It's another element of getting it socially. One very interesting example of this is with fashion, right? So we may have, when we start going out, a perception of what we think is being well dressed. And then we go out and we see people dressed a very different way who are succeeding. A lot of guys, when they start out learning game, they think that the way to dress at a club is to wear a collared shirt and some nice slacks and some nice shoes. And then they go out to the club and they see all these people in black t-shirts and ripped jeans and tennis shoes and sneakers and stuff like that that seem to be doing very, very well. And you could be like, oh no, those guys are slobs, guys aren't well dressed, etc. But if over and over again you see the guys dressed like slobs doing well with the girls, maybe it's time to dress like a slob yourself. Not like an actual slob, but maybe it's time to get with the fashion. Maybe it's time to copy the particulars of that fashion that seem to be working and get rid of this identity of I'm the collared shirt guy and I'm well dressed. Instead be I'm dressed cool. I'm seeing what works. I'm adapting my behavior to what works. And that's fundamentally what we're talking about here. Getting social experiences, being smart about them, and adapting the things that you learn. That is, in its essence, emotional intelligence. So excellent emotional intelligence is definitely built over time and with experience. But here's a little shortcut along the way to make the process easier. If in doubt, put yourself in the other person's shoes and ask yourself, what would I do if I were them? What would I be feeling if I were them? Because remember, you're a human being too. You're basically genetically identical to them in almost every way that matters. So if you can just imagine yourself in their shoes, you're going to be 90% of the way there. If you have specific questions about emotional intelligence, put them in the comments below. Be sure and hit like, subscribe, and I will see you on the next video.